there's been a lot going on in the Final Fantasy VII community, specifically in the shipping community in recent days, because of recent Hamaguchi comments and interviews, because he's been doing a lot of this press tours, a lot of these interviews because of the whole Final Fantasy VII Rebirth being nominated for Game of the Year. And he's been doing a lot of interviews. A lot of people have been going around interviewing him, asking questions. One of the bigger conversations that they had, or one of the bigger questions that they answered, was something about Cloud and Aerith's relationship, and that caused so much fuel into the shipping war that exists within the Final Fantasy VII community. I am part of that war. I have my own preference, which is Cloud and Tifa, but I'm going to try and view this in a very, not necessarily neutral aspect, but try to be as unbiased as I can be, you know? And one of the reasons why is because I like analyzing shipping. And I like analyzing romance and stories, and shipping wars is a huge part of a lot of different fandoms. I'm in several different fandoms, and there's so many shipping wars that occur. And that's why I want to take a look at this and give you my perspective on like some of the arguments, some of the discussions that people have been having within the shipping community in regards to this statement. So Hamaguchi talked about the relationship with Cloud and Aerith, and he states, there can be many different interpretations of what this scene truly means for each player. But Aerith has always been the sort of sisterly character pulling Cloud along and encouraging him, Hamaguchi says. She is feeling what is to come and understanding her fate. She's still pushing Cloud along and leading him in his way, and it shows her pure-heartedness and inner strength. Cloud thought of DP by two different women. Well, lucky guy, that is true. Cloud is a very fucking lucky guy. But the big thing is this whole thing about the sisterly character pulling Cloud along, encouraging him. Now, of course, there is this standing argument that is mostly used by anti-shippers, specifically ones who don't like certain ships or do not believe in the canon ship, where they claim the two characters act like siblings. It is a argument that I never use because I never see characters acting like siblings unless the devs themselves kind of portray it as such. Biggest example would be Cloud and Yuffie, right? They clearly have this like big brother, younger sister type of dynamic. You can clearly see it with the way, you know, Yuffie and Cloud act with each other. They tease each other. They do all of this kind of like what a older brother and a younger sister would do, you know? But then again, you know, if there are people who do ship Cloud and Yuffie, and like I said, you can ship whoever you want, but I think sibling argument has always been one of those where, like, if you have a ship that you really enjoy, that has a really good dynamic, has a really good, you know, solid foundation of friendship, you know, and really has a strong sense of bond that people cannot attack in any sort of way, they will use a sibling argument because they have no other argument to really like tell you why their ship is or that why that ship isn't good. It's been used several different fucking times. I've seen it being used on ships that I like and ships that I liked and then eventually became canon. It happens. Recently, My Hero Academia, a ship became canon. Instantly, people who were either anti-shippers or rival shippers immediately started talking about how like the canon ship acted more like siblings instead of actually being canon. And based on that, you can already tell why that sounds stupid, because the ship is canon at the end of the day. So this is definitely something that I don't necessarily use for any ship, no matter what kind of ship it is. However, when it comes from a developer, when it comes from a creator, when it comes from an author, that's a different story. Because now you're not just dealing with anti-shippers. You're not just dealing with people who just hate your ship or who, you know, who have this different interpretation. It's coming from someone who actually has and works on the actual media, the actual thing that you're consuming, the story. All of this, it comes directly from them, and they know the character way more than any fan will ever know, right? Because they work with them 24 hours, 7 days a week. They dive so deep. They create this character that you enjoy and you analyze. They know what each character is supposed to be, or they create certain things about a certain character that eventually, improves them, gives them upgrades, right? That is, what devs do. That's what authors do. That's what writers do. And they continue to add on these new elements for the character to, make them grow, to make them, have different character improvements. And it's great because you want that if you're a big fan of a character. When a dev says something like sisterly character pulling Cloud along, encouraging him, that doesn't necessarily bode well for the ship, of those two characters. It doesn't necessarily bode well. It can hurt. However, I will say one thing, and I think a lot of people's comes with this confusion that I think I need to address, and it's very important. Sisterly character doesn't necessarily mean that they're actual siblings. What it essentially means is that they have these characteristics of like an older sister. They're not related. There's no like actual sibling connection in any form of way. But older sister characteristic is a really type of character type that exists in, a lot of Japanese anime, manga, video games. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are related in any sort of capacity. So I think that, yes, it does kind of sound like he's saying sibling coded, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are actual siblings in that form of capacity. It just means that their character type and personality and their relationship is that of someone who acts a little bit like someone who is older than you, who takes care of you, who watches out for you. Kind of like, an older sibling would do for you, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it cannot turn romantic, unless they're actually related by blood. Because there's a lot of anime, manga, video games, fiction, whatever, that essentially you have like a younger character, fall in love with an older character who's like an onesan, I guess you could say, which is the Japanese term for like an older sister character. And it doesn't necessarily mean it can't lead to a romance, because it can happen. However, there is a but to this. That only occurs if the romance is supposed to lead up to it. What I mean by that is, usually whenever you have a younger character and an older onesan, older sister type of character that the younger character does have feelings for, that's when you could have and lead to a romantic relationship between the two characters. When you don't have that for one character, it kind of loses its appeal. You don't see it as romantic. And the one thing that Final Fantasy VII does really well is that it shows you exactly what Cloud is feeling towards his thoughts and relationship with Aerith, right? And Aerith even proclaims this as well when she says, I like you, but there's many different types of likes. That is a very important text. That's a very important usage words to essentially describe Aerith's feelings. But Cloud himself doesn't showcase these strong romantic feelings for Aerith. You could claim, the hand holding thing at the end of the, at the end of Rebirth. You could say all of that is like Cloud's confirmation for Aerith's feelings. You could try to interpret it that way, but based on the context, it does not claim at all that Cloud is in love with Aerith. You just can't. Because you can't use that without Cloud actually confessing his feelings of love towards the character, towards Aerith. You can't use that at all, right? So the argument in terms of the older sister thing, you have to have the character be romantically linked with that older sister-esque character, personality type. If you don't have that link, then the romance, the ship doesn't work as well. Now, in terms of like the onesan, the older sister character type, character personality, it's weird because when you think of it like that, it kind of feels like it's wrong, like it's sibling coded, when it's not necessarily that. It just means that it's a character, a older female character who watches out for the younger character because they have this, feeling and duty of to protect this character because they're the older person in the in the friendship. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it is actually sibling coded. It could just be kind of like an overprotectiveness of that character being older than the other, thus the big sister-esque character type. You see it in a lot of, it's a common trope, I guess is the best way to say it. Now, again, you need to have one of the characters actually not mutually, sorry, I watched a video talking about mutually affection and stuff like that, so I'm using that word for God knows what reason. But I'm saying you need to have one of those characters really, really fall in love with the other, but you don't get that. Because it's not confirmed exactly what kind of feelings Aerith has, and Cloud doesn't confirm that he actually does love Aerith, despite other people claiming that's the case. Now, the other debate that comes from this is the whole thing about what Cloud's mom says. A lot of people have been arguing about exactly who Cloud's mom was referring to in terms of like the type of woman that Cloud should get with. And it's been a constant debate since Remake because it's never explicitly said. And so many people on both sides of the shipping war have argued either Aerith or Tifa to it. So let's take a look at it. It's pretty short, but let's take a look at exactly what Cloud's mom says in the English adaptation, in the English translation of this scene.
I've never been so proud. The man you've become? Women must be hounding you day and night.
Not really.
There's all kinds of temptations in the big city. I'd feel a lot better if I knew you'd found a good girl. One who'd make sure you didn't get into trouble.
I can take care of myself.
An older, more mature girl that could keep you on the straight and narrow and tell you when you're being a silly goose. That's the perfect type for you, I'd say.
So, specifically, I think the Japanese version of this scene talks about like an older Onesan. I'm not sure what the Japanese version of it. I don't know if there is a version of it on YouTube, but I believe someone pointed out that it is like Onesan. I don't know if anyone in my chat could verify for that. But what Claudia here says, the type an older, more mature girl that can keep you on the straight and narrow. Now, there is part of this debate where like people believe that the only way for you to be mature is if you're older than the person that she is mentioning, which in this case, Aerith is is older than Cloud. Maturity does not come based off of how old you are or if you're older than a certain person. Maturity comes in many different age groups. Someone younger than you can be more mature than someone older. There are people out there who continuously act like children even when they're far older than, say, me. Right? And there are people who are younger than me who are far more mature than myself or any other person. Maturity doesn't come from age. It can. Don't get me wrong. It can. But it comes from how you, the individual, grew up. It's caused by the environment that you lived in. Because maturity comes from what you've gone through, what you experienced, and what influenced you to be that mature. If you have lived in a place where like you are spoiled, where you are essentially, someone who doesn't have any responsibilities, you are probably less likely to be mature, right? You're probably less likely to be mature. Was Aerith ever spoiled? I wouldn't say she was spoiled because her entire life was just constantly being under watch. And to her, she's kind of more of a extrovert that's trapped within a confined space. But when that happens, when you're an extrovert that's confined in that space and you're finally let go, you are free to act with this sort of freedom that lets you be this sort of like playful character or this playful person who wants to go on adventures, who wants to, hang out with people because you're technically still extroverted, right? When that happens, you can be a little immature in a lot of things that you do because you're more playful. You're more of a child at heart who is now finally set free to be who you want to be. Where in the case of someone like, let's say, Tifa, who is younger than Cloud, but has the posture of someone who is more mature because of what she's been through, such as she has to live on her own, she had to pay off her own debt, she had to essentially go through a bunch of people who have betrayed her, who have constantly harassed her, to starting her own business, owning, or not technically owning, but like, inheriting a bar, Seventh Heaven, from this old man, which you could find out and more information on from Trace of Two Paths. That showcases a lot of maturity, right? Someone who doesn't have responsibility, in terms of like, everyday life and is kind of like, trapped while trying to be this free character, may seem a little more immature than someone who actually had to go through all of this struggles in life that common people do, can become more mature than that person. That's why maturity and age do not fit all the time. You can be mature when you're younger. So I think in terms of Claudia, the one thing I also noticed that a lot of people have also claimed that she's talking about Aerith here, but she doesn't know who Aerith is. She's describing a character who's older, mature girl. So, in the context of that she doesn't know who Aerith is, she talked about like, the city being slightly dangerous, and that the girls might be hounding Cloud because of his good looks and stuff like that. The only person that she kind of has a sort of connection to, like, maybe that idea of maturity would probably be Tifa, because what we know from Traces of Two Paths is that Tifa has essentially had to grow up to learn how to cook, how to like sew, how to do all of this stuff from the other villagers, and that shows a sign of maturity, right? Because she's learning all of these like these abilities, these household, or not necessarily household, but these type of things that people tend to learn as they go, to create their own clothes, to learn how to cook and all that stuff, to be that mature. So what it comes down to is that the one person that Claudia definitely has some sort of knowledge of, someone who could be mature, would be Tifa. Because there's also a passage or a sentence within Trace of Two Paths that talks about how Cloud told Tifa about his desire to be a soldier. Tifa asks Cloud's mom when they work in the soup kitchen to help with the people who are trying to deal with the fiends that are coming down from the reactor, is surprised by this. Surprised that Tifa knows, or that Cloud told Tifa that he wanted to be a soldier, because he never told, her. He never told his own mother what he wanted to do, and yet he told Tifa. Mom's instincts immediately went to, oh, if Cloud only told her about this, oh my goodness, does Cloud have these specific feelings for Tifa, right? Why would he say that to only her and not to his own mother? Meaning that he wanted to keep it a secret because he didn't want anybody to know except for that individual that he probably, to her, assumed she wanted to know that he wanted to become a soldier, specifically because it was meant to only be for her. It was like a secret. Because as teenage boys, if teenage boys tend to hide from the parents, and this is also with teenage girls as well, they try to hide very hard about who they like because they don't want parents to be busy and nosy. They don't want parents to embarrass them. It's a common thing that most teenagers go through. That is a excellent representation of that, which is why Cloud didn't tell Claudia about this, right? And really, just based off that, you can make a better a prediction that Claudia is talking about Tifa than he is about Aerith. Because she has knowledge of Cloud saying something to Tifa that he never told her, meaning that there might be something that Cloud is feeling for Tifa that is special and that she catches that on, and mothers usually have the instinct to catch on to those type of things. So whether it's Tifa or Aerith, I think it's more likely to be Tifa because of the connection, because of what is written in Trace of Two Paths, which is written by Nojima, the same person who writes this game, that the connection fits more to that than Aerith, right? Now, we won't know the conclusion. We won't know who Claudia is actually talking about until we play part 3. But like I said, it's very likely Claudia's talking about Tifa here, right? So that's why it's like, I understand people want to use it as, that Claudia's talking about Aerith because of the whole sister thing now. And it's been a thing that they've been claiming as well for a long time now. If it comes out to it being actually, Aerith's type of character, then that's what Claudia meant. That's what Nojima meant, right? But the way that Aerith is kind of like pulling Cloud along, for a lot of the things that they do in Rebirth, that kind of represents a older sister type. I'm not going to lie, because an older sister type would want this moody teenage younger like person, sibling or whatever, who doesn't want to do anything, and the older sister type, who is more extroverted in that case, would pull him along to make him do things, because that is part of that trope. Older siblings tend to do that sometimes as well. I have an older sibling who tends to make me do stuff like go to bars, which I fucking hate, or like clubs. I'm like, I'm good. And sometimes he will drag me to things. It happens. That doesn't mean that Aerith and Cloud are actually siblings. It just means that it does fit Aerith's, personality type to be like an older sister. Right? But it doesn't mean they're actually siblings. That's not what that means. It just means that that's her character type. And it can happen where, like I said, the trope is that a younger character could, want to be romantically linked with an older character. It happens. It's a common trope. The problem at the end of the day is, what we know from Rebirth is that Aerith does like Cloud, but she doesn't know what kind of like, and she knows what kind of like is love because she did fall in love with Zack. So she knows if she was really, really, really loved with Cloud romantically, she would have said it. She wouldn't have been like, but I don't know what kind of like it is. She would not have said that. And Cloud himself does not ever say anything or reveal or confess to Aerith that he loves her romantically either. So there's nothing there in that regard. So that's my take of what is happening within this debate. Like I said, we will have to wait until part 3, because anything can happen in part 3, but based on what we know and seen in Remake and Rebirth, it doesn't seem like they're changing the story at all to a major degree, from the OG. So it's less likely that Claudia will not be talking about Aerith in this situation, but it will be Tifa. But again, we will have to wait and see in part 3. And I think, and I want this to be very fucking clear, part 3 needs to be fucking absolutely cut and dry. Do not goddamn make us interpret shit again. Do not make us have these weird discussions over and over again. You need to make it clear what ship is canon, what ship is not. We have been doing this for 27 years, these debates. It's about time you have this opportunity, this a definitive edition of Final Fantasy VII, to finally end this debate. And finally end it with the devs' own mouths, with the devs' own stories, with part 3. You just have to end it. There will be people who will still argue against it, but it has to end in part 3. I don't care. I don't care if you want to have people continue talking about Final Fantasy VII like they've been doing with this marketing thing for Rebirth and Remake. Please, just end it. Make it very clear. There were people who still argue, but you have to make it very clear. And I think they will. I think they will actually finally just end this debate once and for all. So we'll see. But thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, my opinion, my interpretation of this whole debate is at least reasonable. You can definitely comment down below. We can have a discussion as long as you do not insult me or say anything to anyone else. I will gladly have a proper conversation with you without resulting into insulting anybody. So thank you so much for watching. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.